الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر
Allah. بسم الله الرحمن
صدق الله العظيم तर्जुमा बेशक इंसान लोगों के जो ईमान लाए और उन्होंने नेक अमल किए और उन्होंने एक दूसरे को हक की वसीयत की और सब्र की तलकीन की सदक़ल्लाहु अलज़ीम
Jazakallah.
Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's start today's 40th PMA academic webinar. This webinar is in collaboration of Pakistan Physiological Society, Azad Jammu Kashmir Medical College, Muzaffarabad, Women Medical College, Ahmedabad, and Pakistan Association of Pathologists. Today's speaker is teachers of teachers, Professor Abi Zaidi. No need to introduce. I have a lot of time to work with Professor Shabi Zaidi when he was chancellor in Barbados, and I was working with his as a vice chancellor. Dr. Shabi Zaidi is the person who introduced the medical education program first time, with collaboration of Dundee and other things. But Professor Shabi Zaidi is nowadays, from the last so many years, conducting the webinars during this COVID on the Sadiq International Virtual Universities. Sir, thank you very much. You also remained a very brilliant start of the Pakistan, and now you are in UK. We always think that you are all with us. Very kind of you that you gave the time on a very important topic of the virtuous physician. Thank you so much, sir. Now it is over to you, sir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you, Dr. Bukhari. You're always very kind and generous. That is virtuosity. That is one of the attributes that physicians should have, to be generous and kind and compassionate. And I also see that my old pal, Shaukat Javed, is here, who actually started working with me, and we published the first ever book on medical ethics jointly. In fact, he was the motivator. That was way back in 1994. Dr. Fatma Jawad was always taught us so many things in medical writing. So greetings to you all from London. It's sunny and beautiful, and it's been very hot this last week, but thank God it's settling down now. Yes, I'm a humble student of medical ethics for a long, long time. My first introduction to medical ethics goes back to 1985, when I was invited by University of Shiraz to give a talk on medical ethics, and I had no idea. Nobody had taught us what medical ethics was all about. So I went to Dr. Zaki Hassan, who was a famous professor and learned scholar, and we sat down, and he said that let's go to Professor Karrar Hussain and discuss with him. So Professor Karrar was my teacher way back in Khairpur when I was a young student. We went to him and we sat down and discussed. We didn't know much about Professor Karrar, of course, knew about all philosophy and the nuances of philosophy, but medical ethics per se was a new subject. Now, those were the days when nobody knew exactly what are the parameters. We didn't know about all these things, that autonomy and beneficence. These came much later. So we sat down, and Shaukat kindly engaged my late friend, Dr. Maqbool Jafri, and of course, Unaz and Niaz, and lots of other people. We published the first book. That was a learning exercise. Lots of things we wrote down were wrong. Now, over the years, I've been reading and reading and reading, and continues to. I have made a point to read at least 4 or 5 pages every day on philosophy, and particularly medical ethics. Even today, I've taken out a book, which is I recommend everybody to have in their bookshelf. This is a book written by Bertrand Russell, It's a concise, it's a compendium of philosophy. It is a book that you read. I read one or two quotations from Bertrand Russell later on. So going on to the topic today, it's called the first Virtuous Physician. This is a term coined by Professor Dr. Edmund Pellegrino, who died in 2013. He was a philosopher, physician in America. So we'll just move on. And if you allow me to, I'm just trying to move the slide. Let's see how it works. So technology always beats me. Do you have a control there that you can?
No, it is controlled to you, sir.
Yeah,
Control with you, sir.
I'm trying to move the slides.
Yes, you click here.
Yeah, I think I sent you a pack of slides, if you can kindly. I'm trying to move, but it's somehow not moving.
Sir, you can use keeping it without slideshow, sir. Go back on the slideshow and click slide one by one, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, you can go one by one. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay. So I'll just start with this and then talk about this, that morality, I mean, everybody knows about morality. It's nothing new that what I'm going to talk about. What I would certainly like to talk about is the golden principles of morality and ethics. Now, morality is the guiding rule. It is the high altar where people sit and talk about the guiding rules and principles and try and tell us about the differences and the pathways and the delicacies of the rules that govern good and evil. Now, ethics is a branch of philosophy. Now, this is a quote that I borrowed from a book written by a very famous scholar a long time ago, which says that ethics is a branch of philosophy. Its other siblings are metaphysics, logic, aesthetics, and politics. Now, later on, people have tried to add religion to it, but that is not true. Religion, when you combine philosophy, becomes theosophy. So that's a different thing altogether. But metaphysics, yes, very important subject. Logic, aesthetics, and politics, the other components. Now, what is ethics? Ethics basically is the theories and the principles. It is a step lower than morality. Theories and practices that govern the attitude of person to follow the right path. And of course, nothing new. We all know from our divine books and our parental teaching and everything. Now, bioethics, the term that came up only in 1980s or even early 90s, when they said that technology is advancing. So ethics applied to medicine and technology is called bioethics. It also expands various fields of medicine, not only just healthcare, but also research and other activities. Now, Islamic principles on bioethics, or not bioethics, ethics are very simple. They're given in the Holy Book and Quran, and they are taqreen, it's respect, dignity, human dignity. Bir is very difficult to define. I remember Dr. Zaki Hassan has written a full chapter in our book on bir. Bir is much more than just beneficence or welfare. It is a very vast subject. Adl, of course, adl is justice, and justice doesn't have only one explanation. It has many delicacies and undertones that I'll try to cover a little bit. And of course, ihsan. Ihsan is the final. Justice is the prime. Justice, in fact, is the founding brick of all ethical principles, religious or secular. And this is a famous quote from the Arabic literature, la darar or fi la darar. That means one must not harm himself or bring harm to others. Of course, in Christianity, also in Bible, we see that do no harm to others, do to others what you would expect others to do to you. The Noble Quran is the compendium, the full mandate is on being virtuous. But Surah Luqman, I've chosen particularly these verses, 16 to 19, where it highlights the fundamental principle of ethics, that's Amr bil Maruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. Now, I've done a lot of research on the translations, and Quran cannot be translated. But of course, transliterations that are available, I've checked several. Dr. Abdullah Yusuf, he was one of the founding, and he really wrote beautifully and translated as best he could. But my favorite is the one translated by Dr. Muhammad Asad. He was a German professor. And he says, Amr bil Maruf, wa Nahi anil Munkar can be best translated as bid good, forbid evil. Bid good, forbid evil. That's the fundamentals. And then, of course, this famous letter, Imam Ali's will in Najil Balagha, which is worth reading. It's a dictate, it's a mandate, it's a direction that all of us should follow. It gives especially the directions to us following the right path and being virtuous. This is a quote that you can refer to things. Now, in the Western theories have been there for a long time. Deontology was the first one. Well, not exactly first, but it was one that came into on the horizon much before the other theories. It is duty-based. It was produced or written down or formulated by Immanuel Kant, and that's his date that I've given here. Then came utilitarianism, which has been there again for a long time, and they're controversial between the two. They never join together. Like minds, brilliant people can never agree on a point. But Bentham, of course, and Mill, they consider quality of pleasure as well as the quantity, and this is the difference between the I mentioned here between the two. And then there's a virtue-based ethics, which is Platonic and Aristotle. Plato actually started, but Aristotle expanded over a period of time that he had more time to elaborate on delicacies of philosophy. What is virtue ethics? I'll go through it rapidly because I'll just try to cover in half an hour. Virtue theory is an approach that emphasizes on the character building of a person. It is not based on one act of goodness. That is deontology, which is based on act, duty, and act working together for a good cause, nor indeed consequentialism, which bases its decision on the consequences of an act that is carried out. So virtue ethics and virtue theory basically means they should build a sound character. That is exactly what the divine books have told us. Virtue is a habit. It emphasizes, it should be emphasized, should be exposed instinctively, repeatedly, and regularly. For example, if you see somebody, a blind person crossing a road, everybody, a good Samaritan will stop and try to help this person cross the road. But that's only once in a while. But if you do it, if you build it as a part of your character and you do it every day, involuntarily, abruptly, it's built into your system, feeding a hungry cat or doing charity or doing good work, I mean, then it becomes a habit. And that is the objective of virtue ethics, that we try to inculcate virtuosity in the character and in the DNA of a person. It is the appropriate response to different situations, and different virtues are associated with feelings. They cannot come without feelings. So you feel emotionally entangled with certain acts, like feeding a hungry person, for example, or helping a blind person cross the road. The feeling of sympathy and feeling of association, engagement, involvement, compassion, and all those factors, they come in together in virtuosity, and you build a character. Virtue is also a mean between two extremes, because the right response to an act depends on your emotional involvement, your engagement, and that is important. And every act is measured and appropriate depending on the situation. And this is where I'll bring in Aristotle's quote in a minute. Plato gave us 4 cardinal rules: courage, compassion, phronesis, and justice. Now, of these, courage, compassion, everybody knows. Phronesis is something which is Greek word for practical wisdom. Now, it's important that you have courage, you have compassion, but unless you have practical application, practical wisdom of applying virtuous activity or any act, whether it's virtuous or otherwise, practical wisdom teaches us as to how to act in the future. And it's a lesson that continues in your system and then improves the quality of work, your association, and whatever. And justice, of course, the pillar of all forms of ethics. And justice is defined in different ways, but I don't have much time to discuss here. Now, the other reference that I'd like to quote here, that of course, Plato and Aristotle, they were a long time before, say, the Sajjad, who was a grandson of Imam Ali. He wrote a book called, it's a collection of sermons that you can read in this book called Sahifa Kamila. He has given several virtues, 12 to 14 virtues are defined in his book. In one particular lesson, it's called Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, and I would encourage you all to read it. It talks that not just courage and compassion, but piety, honesty, truth, loyalty, kindness, generosity, and above all, hukukul ibad and hukukul-Allah. These are all virtues that everybody should get engaged into and imbibe them into system. Now, this is what I'm referring to about Aristotle. Golden mean is a virtue that lies, and it's a mean because it involves displaying the mean amount of emotion, which where mean stands for appropriate. Appropriate activity, you expose emotionally much too much or far less, that is not appropriate exposure or display of emotion in a given situation, like generosity or whatever. And I'll give you a mean from a quote from the book that I have on my side here. The mean amount is neither too much nor too little, and is sensitive to the requirements of the person and the situation. And this is very aptly, it applies to the NHS in the UK, where everybody demands everything, but you have to make a judgment as to what is appropriate for a given person under the circumstances and limited resources and what have you. That's a subject in its own right. Now, courage is associated with fear and is opposite of cowardice. Generosity, compared with, these are two extremes, generosity against miserliness. Modesty was, and I'd like to bring, if you give me 30 seconds to quote from this book, I'd like to read it because I enjoy reading so much that I'd like you to share with me. Now, this is a quote from this book that I just showed you. Aristotle has written, the courage is a mean between cowardice and rashness, liberality between prodigality and meanness, proper pride between vanity and humility, ready wit between buffoonery and boorishness, modesty between bashfulness and shamelessness, and so on. So the important thing about virtue is that you must realize that it should be balanced between the two acts, and not just virtues. Everything in life must be balanced. Mean, Mayana Ravi is the right way. That is exactly what the objective is. And I'll just go on. Justice, of course, is the founding brick of all ethical theories, secular or religious. In healthcare, it has three components: distributive justice, retributive justice, and restorative justice. And I've written extensively on this in the books that are published in medical ethics, and perhaps you can refer to them later on. This is what I said, phronesis is a new terminology. Even to me, it was a new terminology, but I read through it and I found that practical wisdom is the best explanation, definition, translation of the word phronesis. It means that you have to learn from every time you learn, that goes into your system to absorb, to act, and use it as a springboard for the next action. And that practical wisdom is a part of virtuosity. The entire objective of all ethical theories is to give good life, and virtue ethics aims at achieving happiness. And when you achieve happiness to the ultimate satisfaction of your heart, that is what virtue ethics says. That state is called eudaimonia. It can be only translated in Urdu as in fact Persian, as itminan-e-qalb, contentment of heart. Itminan-e-qalb or eudaimonia is the objective that one should achieve through virtue ethics. And these are the questions that you always ask yourself: how should I live? What is a good life? What are the proper family and social values? All these things are familiar to us from our parental guidance and from our religious activities. But even for secular people, I mean, I have a friend who's a very learned scholar, a non-believer in religion, but when you discuss these are things that are universal. So actually, I'm a believer that ethics is a universal thing. We just give it cultural variants depending on the culture, also religious aspect depending on beliefs. Now, these are the famous Western philosophers that I've used in my books, and I continue to write about them. Some of them are new to you, some you might know. I give the strongest credit to McIntyre, what is his name? Alistair McIntyre. He revived virtue ethics in the 20th century after it had died down for almost 2 millennia after Plato and Aristotle. And of course, the current very, very important philosopher is Rosalind Hursthouse, who again says that good human being is a person who's virtuous, and all physicians should be good human beings. He's my guru, Edmund Pellegrino. And as a quote from his saying, that medical profession is losing its commitment to character traits requisite for the protection of the welfare and interests of patients. That is the whole objective, that the medical profession is losing its dignity because we're not ethical, we're not morally correct. And we have to bring a moral compass, as Dean and I'll talk about that in a moment. The decline and fall of the profession is now obvious. A patient has become a client. A physician is called a health worker, at least in the UK, I'm sure in Pakistan and Iraq and everywhere, Iran as well. And now we draw a contract between the services that I mentioned. Therefore, you have to mention everything good, the bad, and the evil. And you talk about the complications, etc. And you have to document them. Document is important. Litigations has become such a common thing, which never existed before. Loyalty is lost. Quality service with the finest equipment is more trustworthy than the human touch, which is good. We should, we should harness technology, but let the human touch remain supreme. And the crisis in professionalism has resulted in the breach of faith. Doctors are not trusted like they used to be. That paternalistic approach is all but gone. We also see that in the ancient, antiquated traditional medicine, we saw that it was all said that Tabib is a good-natured person. And when Tabib is good-natured, half the illness was gone. Abraham Flexner changed a lot of things in medical education. He was hired by Edward Carnegie, I think towards the end of the 19th century. And he published a book, or rather a report called Flexner Report, which revived, organized, disciplined medical education per se. It's a famous report, Flexner Report of 1910. Before that, there was no orderly medical education, curriculum, syllabus, teaching strategies, assessment, evaluation. These were unknown things. Now, what happened was that was a time when typhus, typhoid, cholera, measles, smallpox, they were prevalent. And therefore, he produced a curriculum which is based on sciences. A doctor had to be a multitasking person. He had to be a physician and a surgeon, a gynecologist, obstetrician, or what have you. In the process, he lost humanities. And that is a sad thing, and I regret it. So he based his curriculum, which is called the traditional curriculum that I learned through my teachers like Professor Wahid and Professor Afaq and on all the professors. And I taught over the years. That is called traditional curriculum, which was sciences based. We never learned, we were never taught humanities. Flexner introduced this curriculum, which is full, packed with sciences, but knowledge of humanities was lost in the process. We were taught zoology and botany and what have you, but nothing about the touch of philosophy as to how should one react in a given situation like sadness or bereavement and what have you. Now, this is a new terminology which I learned only recently during the Sadiq International Virtual Webinars from Hasnan. He's one of the technical experts, and Mubashir Iftikhar, who's almost like right hand to us. That technogogy is the new terminology. Physicians should take the technology with open arms and engage it, imbibe it. But what is happening is that technology, particularly in the developing countries, is somehow depriving the human touch. There's no finger on the pulse, no stethoscope on the chest, no third finger. And Dr. Hassan Zaidi is my friend, is a surgeon. I was talking to him the other day that the palpation was the most important. You went into a cavity and palpated with your digital finger. That is why the surgeon's index finger was called the proverbial third eye, but that's gone. The digital, you can't even touch the patients. So medical sciences changed so much over the years. You can't do even a proper ward round in open environment because of confidentiality. So everything is changed and we have to adapt it and adopt those technologies and things that are coming. Technical care far excels now than human care. Pardon my humane there. Patients, however, still expect not just cure from the ailment, but also human touch, humanity, emotions, economical, psychological, and that is what is called the holistic approach. And this is a new thing that's come up, and it's a friend of mine, also my student, Ali Tariq in Saudi Arabia, now Iraq, who's written a phenomenal chapter on what's called phenomenology of medical ethics, and he's talked about these things, and it's coming out in one of the books that we're in the process of publishing just now. So the new thing is that physicians should also become a technologist. I remember when the computers first came in the 1980s, we were scared of it. We didn't know how to use them. Even today, I'm scared of technology, but you have to accept it, learn it. If you do not engage, involve, and accept technology in your career, then what will happen is those physician technologists who adopted, they will leave you behind, and it remains kind of, in a way, left out in the progress. Now I'll just turn towards this important factor. COVID-19 has changed everything. What we've seen in the last 2-3 years, we've never seen before. Contagions have come and gone. We know about the story of biblical plague, and we talk about leprosy and lupus, and of course, in the recent times, we have SARS and MERS and HIV and all those things. And of course, Ebola, which is still prevailing. And of course, we know about things like polio and all that. But COVID was a new thing. It was like a dark cloud which came and engulfed the whole world. The only silver lining, if at all, in that dark cloud has to be the explosion of technology through digital technology and remote learning. What impact the COVID had on all of us? One of them was moral trauma. And I and Shaukat Javed have published this article, which you can read in the Pakistan Journal of Medical Sciences. Moral trauma was sustained by everybody. Parents felt it because they could not take care of the children. Teachers felt it, they could not impart education. Common persons, they felt miserable, loneliness, and everything. What was worse was the loss of trust in authorities. Nobody believed what the health authorities. I mean, you had somebody in the top position telling us to use detoxing, something like you can drink to kill the virus. That was a state of affairs. A loss of faith in health professions. Controllers at the helm of the affairs, the gatekeepers, as they're called in medical terminology and ethical terminology, they all lost hope. They all lost faith. And loss of faith in research scientists was the worst part. Nobody knew what was going on. In fact, to use the right word, the moral compass was deranged. All these authorities, by the international authorities, state authorities, leaders, politicians, scientists, physicians, whoever, all of us, we didn't know where's north, south, east, or west, and we were just groping in the darkness. It resulted in several 100,000 deaths, morbidities, and of course, economic meltdown. Health professionals, I know from my personal experience, some of my friends, very close friend of my classmate, Habib Zaidi, actually died in the first week of January 2020. Another friend, a dental surgeon, he is still suffering with long COVID. So that was because nothing was available to us. Nobody knew what to say. Health professionals lost the desire to live, and they became suicidal. Now, there were some people who were conscientious, they were worried, and they were thinking all the time, and they were constantly trying to engage the people in the higher authority, people in the higher places, higher authorities. And one of them was Sir Michael Mammoth. He is, I'll just talk to you in a minute. Sir Michael Mammoth, I'll come back to in a minute. Now, the virtues that we saw during the pandemic were amazing things. That is what the positive aspect of COVID that I saw. I saw that people were courageous. I'm sure you must have seen in your country as well, that PPI was not available. Nobody knew how to protect. And yet they jumped into the burning fire to save mankind. I saw in pictures in Iraq and from Syria and Iran and Pakistan, of course, as well. And there were shared resources because services are limited, people have limited resources. So they maximize the benefits, particularly in Italy, using the theory of consequentialism and utility. You maximize the benefits for maximum happiness. Volunteership was altruism, was distributive justice was seen during this epidemic or pandemic. These are the good aspects that we saw. This is Sir Michael Mammoth, and you should look up on the Google. Sir Michael Mammoth has a curve called Mammoth Curve, which is world famous. He's a professor of epidemiology in the UK. He pointed out the social disparities which are responsible for all the crises that we saw during the pandemic and in various things. He's a strong believer that the wars that are thrusted in the developing countries by the powerful, the mighty Western powers, they are responsible for many of these disasters in the world because those resources could be channelized to healthcare. WHO doesn't get the share because the money goes away to wars, to Syria and to Iran and Iraq and Pakistan and wherever. Now, he believes very strongly, and this is a quote from here, that authorities should be more honest, fair, transparent, equitable, and accountable. And you should read up Sir Michael Mammoth's writings. He is a very famous person. For the past 50 years, he's been writing. He just retired from UCL. Then came the vaccines, and that was a disaster. First of all, people were against vaccines. Nobody knew what was happening. But when the vaccines came, the rich and the famous, the powerful people who own these vaccines, they jumped onto them. They grabbed them, took away. Majority of people, they vaccinated as fast as they could. and the poor nations, they were deprived. Even today in Asia and Africa, there are many countries who do not have. And then what was happening was that these anti-vaxxers came out. Some of them are famous role models that I cannot name on in public. And they influence a lot of, even now we see patients. I saw one patient day before yesterday where he said that he doesn't believe that vaccine works. There's nothing like COVID. There's nothing like that. There are non-believers. So where is the conscience of the rich and the famous people who guide to control the wealth of the world? Were they not concerned? My answer is the moral compass was deranged. Humanity continued to suffer. Settled communities won, but what about the internally displaced communities in countries where the wars are still going on, in Syria, for example, in African countries, and now in Ukraine? See that people are suffering, and all that is because the rich and the famous, the mighty people control. And this is true, that right is still the might. You try whatever you may. And who imposes wars on famous on the poor nations? The answer is obvious to you, you're learned people. Now, what I propose is, and this is what I did in a conference that we had recently in Iran, and I participated virtually, that we should design a new curriculum, post-COVID, and we should not call it post-COVID because COVID is here to stay. We should call it pan-COVID curriculum. COVID is going to stay. So we should design a new curriculum which engage preventive medicine, which used to be a part of curriculum when I was a student, then it lost its place to other more interesting subjects. If students should be engaged, they should not be left. It's not pedagogy anymore, it's andragogy, which Knowles came forward. He said the students should learn on their demand, learn through what they want to learn, not what you want to teach. You should not spoon feed. Andragogy is what you should try to inculcate in people's mind. And of course, heterogogy is a new word that's come up because now we have to learn to be lifelong learners. If you're not a lifelong learner, you cannot be a student, you cannot be a teacher. It is important that we remain totally committed to continuous reading and learning till the last day of our life. And I believe very strongly after discussion with the experts at the CV platform, Sadiq International Virtual University platform, that face-to-face is the best format, no doubt about that. But since it's not possible because of several reasons, what you can do is remote learning is here to stay, incorporated, learn the technology. E-learning is here to stay, and the beautiful discussion, Dr. Sholeh Bidkali is a famous professor in Iran. She's written volumes on e-learning. You should read it through the webpage of Sadiq International Virtual University. It's volumes on e-learning. Hybridization is the best way forward. You have face-to-face, like in clinical teaching, and theoretical teaching should be all remotely, as is being currently carried out. We have to produce competency-based physician, not theory, not nerds, not theory masters. They should be practical. They should be able to apply knowledge and transfer it in terms of skills. Skills must match the knowledge base. A famous saying from Imam Ali, knowledge without skills is like a bow without an arrow. So you should have a bow and an arrow, knowledge and skills. Now this is like a platform. Knowledge and skills go together. It's like a seesaw. The fulcrum that controls the movement, balances, is ethics. And that ethics is built into your system, into your conscience. We should humanize medicine. We need a curriculum change. We need social accountability. Human dignity should be brought back. Individual and collective responsibility, society, communities, public, people who control the authorities, they should take care of it. Services should be based on needs and not affordability. We should own technology, become a technolog physician, which is important. And I strongly believe that John Rawls' social contact theory, providing level playing field, should be applied in healthcare services across the world. Able bodies should compete with the able-bodied and disabled with disabled. But everybody should have justice based on the basis of equality as well as equity. Equity is different from equality. Fairness should be there, and transparency is an important factor. Now, this is what I have developed through my reading, etc., that what should be the attributes of a virtuous physician. In my view, just follow the teachings of Islam. Siratul Mustaqim, that is the intention. Surah Al-Hamd is full mandate on following the right path. You cannot go wrong if you're not. But then for people who are non-believers or people of other faiths, the golden meal of Aristotle can be followed. You should be soft-spoken, quiet and sedate, kind and generous, courageous but not heroic. Do not do all the way. Do not impress the people by heroic surgery when you know that it's futile. Futility treatment is a very important factor. You should learn to live in solitude, because solitude gives you an opportunity to meditate, to reflect on your thing. Reflective thinking is vital. You must learn from your own mistakes, furnaces, practical wisdom. They all should be integrated into your character. You should be non-interfering other people. Nothing like Imam Ali was once asked, where have you found peace? He said, I found peace in keeping away from other people's affairs. Mind your own business. You should be a lifetime learner and should match skills, knowledge and skills, knowledge with skills, and should be moral and ethical. So take home message from this talk is humanize medicine. Make it, bring it back to the golden days of humanity being the fundamental principle of medical care, and produce virtuous physicians in your institutions. I'd like to thank you and encourage you to visit this website, www.sivu.alsadiquniversity.com. You'll find loads of material in it. Now we're in the process of writing 2 books. One book has already gone to Springer. It is on medical ethics and medical education combined together. And the second book, which we just completed, it's in the process of being released. It's an ebook only on medical ethics during the COVID years, pan-COVID. Mubashir Iftikhar is working at the moment, and hopefully it should be out there, about 40 odd chapters on different aspects of medical ethics seen during the pandemic of COVID, before and after. I'd encourage you to read it. I'm grateful to you for giving me. I'm open to debate and discussion, and will welcome any questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your nice lecture, presentation, and moral values. We should be a lifelong learner. Now, so many chief editor of renowned journal of Pakistan are present. I will request I will request Shaukat Javed Saab to give some comments on it. Shaukat Javed Saab.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Mulazam Bukhari. Thank you, Professor Mulazam Bukhari, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Shabir Zaidi for an excellent presentation and highlighting the important features of a virtuous physician. My question to him is, we see in Pakistan, the medical profession has been infected with a materialistic virus to a great extent. Now, the unethical practices, particularly followed by the professional specialty organizations, have crossed all limits. How can we check this?
Shaukat, it's not just in Pakistan. It's happening here also in the UK. I mean, Mushir is sitting here. He has been in the NHS since a long, long time. He probably a baby after. That, even here, greed is a human vice as against a virtue. So what is happening is that the NHS that came because of the post-war era, etc., the whole story behind it. Now that NHS being privatized very quietly, very seditiously, is being privatized. In America, you travel often to America, you've seen how it is. It's a different world altogether. World is full of greedy people. So let's not blame Pakistan. It's everywhere. Everywhere it's the same thing is happening, that people who were supposed to be good human beings, physicians, Tabib was supposed to be alim. That is why he was called Hakim. Even today we call gallant Hakim Jalinus, Hakim Bukrat, because they were respectable, honorable people who lived within their means. The greed has come because the world has become very commercialized. And you're right, I saw it myself with you when I was in Pakistan. I see it every day now in retail. Commercialization has become, and a lot of that goes because we do not teach philosophy, we do not inculcate philosophy in our curriculum. This is what I would say, that let us bring back those old teachings, social sciences, humanities, philosophy, and the learning exercise that we have. The first madrasa is our mother's knee. We learn from our parents. Role models have to be important. Unfortunately, families are, especially in the UK, there is no family. It's all broken up. So social fabric is broken down. It is like, and I say it all the time, that the Western fabric is untextured. It's like the broken, the tattered gleam, whereas the Eastern culture is intricate, like the Tana Bana that you see in a qaleen, in a beautiful tapestry. So we're still intertwined with the families, and those values must be kept. We learn from our seniors and we apply those. And that is exactly what we should do in future life. But I feel very strongly that social sciences should be brought back as a part of curriculum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Professor Munir, you have raised the hand. Professor Munir is a professor of microbiology and teacher, very senior teacher in Azad Jammu Kashmir Medical College. Ji, Professor Munir, you want to ask the questions? Professor Munir, you unmute. You can unmute. I have allowed you to speak. Okay. Professor Munir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zadi, for a very nice talk. My question is again about commercialization. You know, this is an era of social media and of offer of treatment, you see, to the people. Can we sit together and design the minimum strategies so that we can incorporate the attributes of virtuousness and, you see, offer the treatment to the people? Because nowadays, if you don't, you see, introduce yourself to the people properly, people will not come to you. Or in other words, what can be the minimum standards of, you see, by which we can advertise the offer of treatment? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Munir. You're very kind and generous to like my humble talk. You see, a long time ago, when we were writing the first book called Medical Ethics in Contemporary Era, Shaukat, Zakia Sen, myself, Bunez, and Makbul Jafri, we came up with a terminology. In fact, this was a term coined by either Shaukat or Makbul Jafri, that all the pharmaceutical companies who take you for a ride in the name of educational session to Sri Lanka or to Bangkok, wherever. I'm guilty of that, myself, I must confess. So all those things, they are basically to entice you to writing their prescription, writing their medicines, or in America, for example, they do for devices using whatever. And the word that Makbul Jafri and Shaukat came up with is what's called sick tax, because that money they've invested in you is transferred to the patient. And that is the word called sick tax. We should get rid of it. We should form societies. We should collaborate with people like Shaukat Javed, was Fatima Jawad is here, a great scholar, great writer. We should write in our journals, bring out the bad, the evil things, and form cohesive societies, collaborative societies to outline the guidelines, the principles that should apply in day-to-day practice. Commercialization, you cannot stop. But what you can do is you can still see, being a whistleblower is not easy. Somebody has to do that. And I know Fatima Shaukat has been doing, and Professor Munir, you can also do that. So join hands of good people to outline the black sheep must be isolated, identified and isolated.
Thank you so much, sir. Really, it needs Professor Munir awareness about it, and we should read the literature and we should write ourselves about this, because the basic ethics of the Islam are the ethics humanities. Now, Professor Shehzad Anwar, Muhammad Shehzad, you have raised the hand. You can ask the question, Dr. Shehzad.
Yes, sir, I'm listening, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Shehzad Anwar is the head of the Department of Urology and Transplant Surgery in Services Institute of Medical Sciences. He was recently principal of Quaid-e-Azam Medical College. Thank you so much. Dr. Shehzad.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we faced a scenario in Bahawalpur when one of our attendants, he complained to the principal, to me, that the doctors signed a DNR, that is do not resuscitate, and while they were doing the CPR, they just started the CPR, and then our family didn't allow, but later on it came to my, the attendant said it came to my information that CPR can save the patient. Then why they have signed this DNR from us and we did not know the medical terms in it? So my question is that most of the time we encounter with these, when we do medical auditing, we have seen a lot of doctors writing DNR in front of the attendants when they start doing endotracheal intubation or when they're doing the CPR. And these people who are not very much literate in our society, when they see their patient in such a difficult situation, they do not allow the doctors to make more discomfort for the patients. So what is the ethical limitations, or what is the ethical guidelines in Islamic perspective or Western perspective which allow us to where we should go for a DNR? Is it ethically allowed, or it is religiously allowed for us to do a DNR and let the patient die without doing any CPR or without doing any endotracheal intubation, just on the consent of the attendants? So here we are somewhat confused that if the patients are pressing us not to do DNR, is it not let a patient die without giving any medical support? So it is a question from Professor Shabir Zaidi and even certain other experts in this forum. They can apprise us in this situation, I think. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shazad. This is a wonderful topic. You've opened a Pandora's box. I mean, DNR and DNAR. Do not resuscitate and do not actively resuscitate. There are two terms that are used. And we've written extensively on these subjects in various books that I've published, and the articles and everything. It's everywhere. I would refer you to a beautiful article that Dr. Shabir Ali Bhai, who is a physician in Canada, has written for our book, and I'll send a copy to you. Where he elaborated DNR and DNAR in the light of teaching of different fuqaha of various sections of Islam, Shia, Sunni, Wahhabi, Maliki, etc., etc. It's a beautiful article. They all come to the single consensus that life and death belong to Allah. You cannot take the decision. But what is important is that, do you want the humanity to suffer? Now, this is a debate that's going on even today as we talk. Only this morning I was listening to Radio 4, which is BBC Radio, very much powerful session, where they're talking about sending patients, allowing patients to kill themselves. Assisted dying is the word that's being used here in the UK. And there is a place in Dignitas in Switzerland where people go to paying about 10, 15,000 pounds to die peacefully and comfortably. Even in the UK, there was a pathway called Liverpool pathway, disastrous method that was used in the early 2000 up to 2010, where a patient who was terminal was allowed to lie comfortably in a very comfortable, cushy environment, etc. And gradually the morphine will take over, it will die peacefully. Now, DNR is a very controversial subject. My view is that you should do as much as you can, but you cannot prolong the misery, nor can you expedite death. Decision has to be based on clinical judgment. And when you talk about DNR, there are lots of greedy family members who would like an elderly person to die quickly so the wealth could be distributed. This is where virtuosity comes in. That is where the role of physician comes in. He has to find out, filter out the real information, the real from the fake information, real from the fake data that's available. Therapeutic nihilism is wrong. You cannot expedite death, nor should you become heroic, that you keep on operating, doing cardiac massage or open heart massage, whatever, because you want to prolong the life, or put the patient on a ventilator because you want to prolong for certain. This patient says that, you know, we can. I remember distinctly one patient who said, I will sell a house, but please don't let him die. Well, you can't do that. Life, and there is a time that life has to. This life is not the end of the world. This life is intaqal, is muntaqali. The ruh is transferring from one to another source. We do not die. Look, and I've written a full volume on the concept of ruh. What is qalb and what is ruh? It's a very philosophical debate. I love to debate with people who are interested. So nothing is happening. The physical body remains behind, and it's nothing but carbon cycle. The body stays behind, but the ruh goes into a different. So the answer to your question is that you should be critical, you should be thoughtful, you should be virtuous. Decision should be based on clinical judgment, not on lack of resources or availability of resources, or the greedy relatives wanting their elder to die. You have to decide based on the fundamental principles of medical ethics, that is, do what is good and avoid what is harmful.
Dr. Athar Mahmood is a young doctor, and he is asking the question. Dr. Athar, you can ask yourself.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for asking me. Sir, first of all, I would like to say that it is a very much good forum. My professor is here as well. So this is on the Sundays, you are sparing the time and giving the link openly without any cost to share your experiences here. Because of COVID, movements and traveling has been much restricted. So it is a very much good forum. I have joined late. So even then, I am getting experience shared from all you people internationally as well. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mushir Hussain, very senior teachers and teachers of teachers. I was just asking from you to share your ideas. You raised the hand. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. I don't know where to start. It's the talk was so comprehensive, as Professor Zaidi often does. He has touched so many subjects within this subject, and it's so detailed. I must first admit that I have learned so much from this talk this morning, and it was worth getting up to come and listen to him. Well, I do get up early, but this was very knowledgeable and entertaining. And also, in terms of 2 or 3 aspects that particularly I was interested in, was his use of technology as the superior to human touch in the sense, and this is absolutely true. This is true in this country because we have the equipment to do so. But having worked in Pakistan and having done some work in Nepal over a period of time, I know that in the third world, sometimes you have to think through and find a way out in dealing with patients when equipment is lacking, because equipment is dear, thinking is not expensive. So that's something, this term as a whole jars a bit. It is true, absolutely the right way to go. But the reality is, and as you pointed out during the COVID vaccine distribution, this was pretty obvious that how it was concentrated in developed countries and not spread out as it should have been. Because nobody is safe from COVID until everybody is vaccinated. The idea of isolation does not work. So in terms of the pharma industry that we've talked about, it is a problem here as well, as you rightly said. And, there is something that we have to look at ourselves as well. I did a survey of medical students in the University of Dundee Medical School when they were with us in the first and second year. And we asked them questions as to what motivated you, what brought you into this, and what are your ambitions. And predominantly their views were altruistic. They wanted to help. They were, the role model was a GP that they have seen, the general practitioner or the family doctor, or a family member who was a doctor. They were so well motivated in the first and second years. And I asked the same batch, 3-4 years later when they were graduating, the same questions. Obviously, it was anonymous. And the results were so different. The students were now saying that, they will choose a field where they can progress quickly, where career development would be important. Money became important suddenly. The role of night duties and, very practical things came into it. So, and the role models, they had forgotten completely. They were now into making their own names in a lot of ways. I can't say everybody was like this. And as I asked them, what would their specialty be in first and second year, they said they would definitely have decided by the time they come to final year. But in final year, they were saying, oh, we only know what we don't want to do. We have so many things to think of. And so certainly we'll know after we've done house jobs. So sometimes I feel that we fail our students in this, because they see us, they see our colleagues, they see how we deal with patients, they see how we set our values, and they learn from that. And I think we bear some responsibility in this too. So we have to look at ourselves as well. And I think, the coverage of Islamic teaching and the basis that forms our value system, and to know the difference between the price of something and the value of something is something very fundamental that we learn at home. It is hard to bring this on at a late stage, but I think this is important for us to understand. And DNR, of course, is something that, as Professor Zaidi pointed out, is something that is very rife in this country. And we use it for the reasons that he has stated. But euthanasia or killing something is not something I subscribe to. But DNR, yes. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If anybody can ask the question.
No, thank you. Can I just comment on? It's wonderful. Thank you for coming. You're an early bird, like I said, so it was good to have you here. So the thing that you mentioned very beautifully about the role models and things is there is a thing which has been there. Hefferty was a person who actually introduced this term in 1988. It's called hidden curriculum, the hidden curriculum. So the hidden curriculum has been a part of medical education for a long time. So what it means is that you learn manners and etiquette from your parents, your family, your upbringing, your social get, but also from your role models. That the role of role model, even today, I remember my teachers like Professor Fazlillahi. I mean, he was a role model for a lot of us. He was sedate and quiet and wonderful, competent, etc. And I believe, who was the other one in Lahore? It was famous Professor Amir Ahmad, I think was, and many people. Role model was there. This is the message of my talk, that the world is changing. It's commercializing. It's everything. But mean must be. The mean should be. You cannot be a pauper, nor should become rich and famous. Doctors can be well off, but they cannot be wealthy. If you want to be wealthy, go to another business or something, commercialize, sell drugs, do whatever if you like. But if you want to maintain the dignity of life, this is the thing, you must maintain the dignity of profession by being honorable, ethical, moral, live within your means. And in order to do that, you have to have certain role models. And the best role model is your family itself, your parents. And that social fabric that I mentioned earlier on is important to maintain. Thank you for your comment, Mushir.
Professor
Shabi Zaidi.
Ayub?
Professor Shabi Zaidi, if
yes, Ji Shaukat.
Professor Shabi Zaidi, if you can emphasize a little bit about involving the family in the patient management, it will reduce a lot of problems that we see in Pakistan.
Yes.
Involving the family in patient management, whatever the possibilities are.
Yeah. Can you show us your face? I can only see the fan on the ceiling.
Shaukat Javed.
It's not working actually. I don't know the problem.
Let me see your chance, Achera.
It's okay. Go ahead with it.
All right. So family engagement is very important. I think it's every society. In Pakistan and India and Iraq and Iran and a lot of Chinese community, family engagement is vital for any major decision making. When there is a critical situation like a patient who's in a terminal stage, and see, you must differentiate this terminology. Again, I'd like to point out, terminal care is different to palliative care. A lot of people. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Palliative care is where the chance of recovery. The terminal is terminal. That is. In both these elements in the UK. Can you
unmute?
Athar Mahmood Saab, please unmute yourself. Athar Mahmood Saab. Sorry, mute yourself.
Can you mute?
Right, thank you. So family engagement is important. All decision making should be jointly done. See, the problem, Shaukat, is that every society has its own merits, good and the bad parts. In Pakistan, we're proud of associations and close relationship with parents, siblings, even cousins, whatever. We grow up together and get engaged in involvement. That's wonderful. But what is happening is that because of this commercialization and the lalach, the greed, even the families are splitting away. You just